The following podcast contains alcohol-enhanced conversations about alcohol, as well as a potential for discussions about other topics of dubious, disturbing, possibly offensive, but usually hilarious interest. The opinions stated herein are solely of the person stating them, and any endorsement of these opinions by any other party is not implied. Foul language is likely, but intolerant viewpoints are not. Listener intoxication is advised. Excuse me, last call. Last call. Please, somebody, listen. Oh, I'm going to get dreadfully angry. Last call. Last call. Arg, you bastards, I said last call. Boo all you want, I don't care. Just get the hell out of here. But order one more drink before we go. Wow, that guy's really angry. Hello and welcome to the first last call episode of the Whiskey Tangent podcast. I'm Scott.
And I'm Ed.
And this is something that we talked about doing maybe on a monthly basis, but that was going to be too much fucking work. And this might turn into some sort of bad sitcom clip show, but we're going to see what happens. And Ed's going to tell you basically what we're going to try to accomplish with this.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So we figured halfway through the first year would be a good time to recap what we've done in the first 6 months since we started the podcast, which we aired in April 11th with the first episode. And before we get too much farther into it and we get too much more material to go over, and just kind of highlight some of the things that we thought was worth mentioning and funny and noteworthy, kind of give a little shout out to some of our fans that are out there and some of the feedback that we've gotten. Also talk about some of the whiskeys that we've enjoyed and just kind of do a recap, if you will.
Yeah, and some of the little like behind the scenes stuff that we did that nobody maybe knows about. Sort of like we can get into the origins of the podcast, like how it actually came up. It was me who had the idea to do the podcast, and I think I've been saying it just sort of as a joke for the past 2 or 3 years.
Well, because the way you would say it is, this is so fucking funny, we should be recording this.
Right.
We would drink whiskey and we would talk about funny stuff with each other, with our friends who have at times guested on the podcast.
Right.
And we said, you know, like Scott said, oh my God, this is hysterical.
Yeah.
This is something we should be recording.
The world is missing out on this. It was
we're so damn funny, they should hear us.
We were a little drunk and arrogant, I guess, at the time. But I mean, you have to be a little bit arrogant to like start a podcast and put it out there.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm kind of an introvert. Ed is not. So it's sort of interesting to hear your voice on somebody else's phone.
Yeah.
It's very strange. Anyway, so I had the idea just half jokingly, and it was early this year. It was January.
Right.
And I must have said it again. And then like a couple weeks later,
I said, hey, so Amazon's got podcast starter kits. 2 mics, 2 headphones, a mixing board.
How much was it again?
It was $198.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, are we doing this? And I was like, let's do it. And so we put the order in and we've upgraded some of the things, but the mixing board is still the same.
Yep.
And we use a laptop. It's very simple.
They have 2 mics, 2 headphones.
Yeah. We have 4 mics now. We've because now our guests have,
right.
They want their own mics now. They can't share mics anymore. Everyone's so entitled.
Yeah, geez, them and their green M&Ms.
So nobody will know what that means. But if you're Van Halen fans from the 80s, you'd know.
That's right.
And I think it was brown M&Ms. But anyway.
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah.
The reality is, all right, now I got to tell the story. When a rock band comes into a place with a promoter, they have a whole list of conditions called a rider.
Rider?
I barely know her. It could be like what type of spring water they want in the bathroom, what type of food they want during the buffet. And for Van Halen, one thing they had was a bowl of M&Ms, which I believe it said all the brown M&Ms had to be picked out. The reality is, everyone who heard that story thought that they were pretentious pricks to have somebody pick out their goddamn M&Ms for them. But when the story came out, it was their tour manager. He said that when he walked into a place, if the brown M&Ms were picked out, that means they read to the bottom of the rider, and he could relax about some of the other things. It was just something he did to make sure that the facilities were following his instructions.
Okay, so I looked it up on Snopes.
Yep.
So the claim is Van Halen's standard performance contract contained a provision calling for them to be provided backstage with a bowl of M&Ms from which all the brown candies had been removed.
Yes.
The rating is a mixture, as David Lee Roth explained in his autobiography. It says the contract rider, as you said, read like a version of the Chinese Yellow Pages because there was so much equipment and so many human beings to make it function. So just as a little test, in the technical aspect of the rider, it would say, Article 148, there will be no brown M&Ms in the backstage area upon pain of forfeiture of the show with full compensation. So when I would walk backstage, if I saw a brown M&M in that bowl, well, line check the entire production, guaranteed you're going to arrive at a technical error. They didn't read the contract. Guaranteed you run into problem. Okay, so that's from their autobiography.
Right.
Nonetheless, media ran exaggerated and inaccurate accounts of Van Halen using violations of the no brown, or justification for engaging in childish destructive behavior.
I never heard that part. I heard the first part that it was just to check the rider.
I think they're saying it's a mixture because of the people were saying that they were using that clause as an excuse to do some bad things.
Right.
And that's not really what happened. It was really just so that they read the contract.
Right. And this is an extremely sideways early tangent.
It's what we do. We drink whiskey and we go off on tangents. Right. We are well named. So yeah, back to our origins. So we ordered the equipment. We sort of like fumbled how to use it, how to hook it up.
Yep.
We set it up in my apartment where we're sitting right now at my breakfast bar. We have microphone arms that we can position in any way and put the microphones really close to our faces, because before we didn't. If you listen to our first few episodes, I think
it would be like
it was our mic discipline is still not the best, but
well, we bob and weave after like our fourth drink. That's the problem.
Maybe we should be strapped into the chairs,
like Hannibal Lecter when they're wheeling them out to the airplane.
And
then you just shove the mic right up to my face.
Right.
Because let's be honest, I'm way worse than you. Let's be honest. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was crazy because we decided that, all right, well, we're going to just record like 4 episodes before we even release anything.
Actually, we did 6.
We did 6, right? They were all in the can before the April 11th launch date, which we had planned ahead of time.
Yeah, I think the first day we recorded, because I named the files after the date that we record them, was January 31st. So we had decided that we were going to do this, bought all the equipment, learned how to use it, and between then and April 11th, we recorded 6 episodes.
Right. And did we do a few shorts too, right? Didn't we though?
I think we did one short because we decided to release them every other week so we give our livers a break. And then one of us had the great idea to do short form episodes in the intervening weeks.
We wanted to have product coming out every week.
Yeah. And we'll get to those too.
The shorts are funny. So then just a little background. That Christmas, I'd received 2 tumblers. One of them had the Constitution on it, and one of them had the Declaration of Independence on it. So Scott's tumbler is the Declaration of Independence because he had the spark.
I had the idea for the podcast, just like the Declaration
right.
was.
I kind of put everything in motion to make it happen. So I get to drink out of the Constitution glass.
Right. That's how we divide responsibility here at the Whiskey Tangent Podcast. You drink out of that glass because of these reasons, which are completely overthought.
But also, sometimes we have multiple glasses out in support of these, and it helps to know which one our glasses are. So it's good to have wording on it.
It's true.
So before we go too much farther and get into some of the episode specifics, I wanted to do some shout outs. First of all, my cousin Nancy and her husband have been listening since the beginning, and I just have to give them a shout out. They've been fantastic supporters. They listen regularly. They give us feedback. They even catch some mistakes for us and be like, yeah, you might want to go back and listen. I think you cut out the question, which was a true story. And we had cut out the question.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give her a shout out because she's been so dedicated and so supportive. So thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. I don't know you, but I thank you. And I'd like to give a shout out as well to my friend Mike at work. We've worked together for over 20 years. He's the organizer of our happy hours, and he doesn't even like whiskey. He had a bad experience with Jack Daniels in college, and he just hasn't been able to get back into it. But he listens to our podcast. He likes everything that we post on Facebook, and he's just an all-around nice guy. Thank you, Mike, for listening and for your continued support.
So, having our podcast published for 6 months, we've been listened to in some really interesting places. Scott, tell the people, because I want to give a shout out to all of our fans internationally. It's crazy who's listening to us and where.
Yeah. So we have people who have listened to our podcast outside of the United States in descending order of number of downloads. We start with Afghanistan.
There's a story there, though. Are you communicating with some?
Yeah, the guy reached out. He actually lives in Marlton, but he's over
in New Jersey.
Yeah, he's over there in Afghanistan. For some reason, he didn't say, we assume military.
Yeah, he's either serving his country as a soldier or, I'm assuming, a military contractor, or I can't see he's vacationing.
No, he didn't sound like he was vacationing. I won't say his last name, but his first name is Brian. Thank you, Brian, for listening.
Thank you, Brian, for opening us up to a completely different continent.
Actually, it was his wife, I think we should also thank, because she was the one who told him about our podcast in the first place.
Wow.
And I'm not sure he mentioned her name, so I'm sorry if he did, but thank you, Brian's wife.
Thank you.
As well. So the next country is South Africa.
Wow.
Somebody from South Africa. Her name on Twitter is Wenchi, and she's a blogger from South Africa.
She's following the podcast on Twitter?
She is.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's her. May not be her, but that's sort of a coincidence that I started seeing South Africa in these stats, and then she liked us.
Well, if she's listening still, we appreciate, hit us up.
Yeah,
so now
absolutely.
So we're in Afghanistan, which is part of Asia, so that's one continent. And then we're in Africa.
South Africa, right?
That's
So we're in
another
Africa. That's another continent.
So let's keep building.
So now we're in 3 continents.
Can we get to Europe?
Third on the list is Mexico.
All right, Mexico.
We speculated that this might be a cousin of your stepbrother Joe.
It's possible. Who knows? There's a lot of ways it could have happened.
Sure. So unfortunately, Mexico doesn't put us on another continent, and neither does the next one on the list, Canada. But I think they stopped listening.
Right.
But
because still haven't done Canadian whiskey.
And yeah, right. So that might be.
So they're like, you know what? Fuck you guys. Okay, if you can't do Crown Royal by now, I mean, we've mentioned Crown Royal.
We have.
All right. I'd like Crown Royal.
Oh no,
I like it.
We will do an episode.
I don't.
Yes.
They're not listening, so I don't know why I'm appealing to them. But if they turn back in, I don't hate Crown Royal. I like it.
No. Next one is India. I think that might be a guy I work with. I think he was out on vacation and he went to India and he listened to him there. I could ask him.
I like how we refuse to believe that anybody just came across it organically. And liked it. We always have to feel like there's somebody we know that is the only reason they're listening to us.
And all of these are like 5 and under, so I'm just going to read them all the way down. So we got Romania, Germany, Czech Republic, United Kingdom, Australia. Oh,
another continent.
We're on 6 continents now. Yeah. Oh no, we didn't get South America.
We haven't got South America yet?
No. France, Ukraine, and others.
What does that mean?
Maybe it's like an island nation or something like that.
All right. So in my period of time when I managed motels in the summer times, I worked with a lot of people from Europe. So I'm guessing that Romania and the Czech Republic are people that I worked with.
Again, we're trying to...
Did a great job.
We're trying to...
Right. I can't believe somebody in Romania just organically stumbled across, hey, I like whiskey.
Well, it's true. I mean, in the United States, possibly, right? The vast majority of the people who listen to us are
I think it could be clear to all you that our main goal for the second half of the year is to flood the South American market with downloads of at least 5 or more.
I mean, Brazil is a huge country.
Right.
It's the 5th biggest in population in the entire world.
Right. 3 million people slept on a beach for 3 days to hear the Pope speak.
Right.
Surely we can get 5 downloads.
Right. That's Rio, right?
I guess it was real. I hear it was real dope.
Cut that out.
You cut out all my funny stuff. Hater.
I do not.
I know because all my stuff is
all right.
gold.
So if you don't know by now, I am the editor of the podcast and I adhere to 3 strict rules. Rule number 1, is it informative? Rule number 2, is it funny? Rule number 3, is it leading somewhere informative or funny? If it doesn't follow any of those rules, it gets cut. The ruthless blade of the edit button, it gets cut. Because I don't want people being bored.
Right.
No, you never want that. If I'm listening to it after I've edited it and I find my thoughts drifting or something, I'm like, oh, well, that's bad.
I legit trust him implicitly. Like, he's very good at knowing what works and what doesn't. I mean, there's times when I know what I said, and then all of a sudden when I listen to the episode, like there's a 30-second story that's gone, and I'd be like, hey, what about the story? He's like, yeah, it wasn't funny. No, it wasn't funny. I'm like, all right.
And just to be clear, when he's listening to it for the first time, it's not after it's released.
Like, I literally come over for a pre-listen before we release it to make sure that,
right.
just to give some, quality control. I mean, it's a lot of pressure on Scott to release the whole episode. We have the entire whole episode that we recorded that we can always go back to, and we can reinsert stuff and all that. We've actually even moved stuff sometimes from the end to the middle to break up.
Right.
Because we felt we were being too informative for like 20 minutes where it's like, there's nothing else we're talking about here except whiskey and distilleries.
Right.
Which is informative, but
it's not fun.
You want to change the focus of every now and then to keep it fresh. So we have a good time with that, and he's amazing at it. And I thank him for all his hard work because he works really hard.
Well, thank you, sir. Cheers.
And while we're speaking about cheers, we have to speak about a very prideful moment for us. We've made no bones about it that at the Whiskey Tangent Podcast, our house whiskey is Bulleit Rye for two very good reasons. One, it's almost like Scott's rules. Is it delicious?
Right.
Is it price reasonable? Then we buy it.
Yeah.
Bulleit Rye lends itself to cocktails, drinking it neat, and it takes good on a globe on the rocks.
And actually, they have a 12-year rye that we actually didn't like as much because I think it was too oaky.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because, to be perfectly honest, to the 12-year rye, we just have consumed so much Bulleit Rye that we've grown to be very fond of it. And so to see a variation of it, it's like, oh, it's Bulleit Rye, but not quite Bulleit Rye. For the rest of the world, go and gobble up the 12-year. I'm sure you'll love it. The story about this is...
The reason you brought this up.
We talk about Bulleit Rye a lot. It was in our first episode. It was in our 5th episode. It was in the glass short. It makes its appearance wherever we need a standard or control group whiskey.
Because we're very scientific.
So we actually got some love. Bulleit hit us up.
Yeah, it was their PR firm in New York City, the whiskeytangent@gmail.com email address. Got an email. They said, we really like your podcast. We want to send you a bottle.
Yeah, so they did. They sent us a bottle of Bulleit right here. And we opened it today in honor of our first 6 months to celebrate. But it was nice of them to do it. And we hope to, develop relationships with other whiskeys that we like. Well, whether it's Woodford Reserve or whether it's Knob Creek or whether it's Basil Hayden.
And if any one of those wants to send us a free bottle, we're not going to object.
We will drink free whiskey. Now, Old Crow, we're good. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. The coolest thing about it was that when we finally did get the bottle, came with a nice, handwritten note.
Right.
Handwritten.
Right. They invited us to Kentucky. If we ever come to Kentucky, they want us to come and I wasn't sure if they're inviting us to visit them or to actually do an episode from the visitor center. They built a new visitor center, like to invite you to.
I think it was just come visit.
I like to pretend that it was
okay
to go and actually go on the road and do an episode from Bulleit.
All right. Okay.
Which I bet I could make happen if we ever went to
Oh,
Kentucky.
yeah. So if you're wondering what Ed does on the show, besides being hilarious and really good at improvisation, I don't mean to say, are you wondering what Ed does on the show?
What is Ed? Why is Ed on the show? Does he just drink and Scott does all the work?
No, that's not what I meant. But like I said before, I'm sort of an introvert and he's an extrovert. So we're out at a bar, we're anywhere. We went to the Iron Maiden concert just a week or so ago, and he's making friends with the bartender there. That's not something that I will do. He gave him our Whiskey Tangent card, buttering them up so that he'd give us better pours.
Yeah.
Which is, something that's
I don't expect free drinks when I go out, but to those people who always look for nuggets of information, here's one for you right now. A lot of people wait to tip the bartender to the end, and that's standard, and that's fine. And you need to tip them at the end. But the first thing you need to do is give them a $5 bill. As soon as they give you your first drink, pay for the drink, and then slide them a $5. And tell them your name. Hi, I'm Ed. I'm going to be here all night. You will get better pours.
I mean,
so that $5 will come back to you. Trust me.
It eventually adds up to an extra drink. So, because if you're getting one for you and one for somebody else, he's better pouring for both of those.
And he comes to you quicker. You wait less.
Right.
And
he's like, oh yeah, that guy.
If you're drinking good stuff like Scott and I do, $5 is nothing if you're going to be getting an extra, half ounce or ounce on every time that you go up there.
So Ed is our in-person ambassador. I'm the behind-the-scenes guy. We were just at the Whiskey Lounge the other night, and then there was two women sitting in the area that we had reserved for us and some of our friends. And Ed was engaging them in conversation. He didn't kick them out right away. He was like, there was still room. Our all friends hadn't arrived yet.
Only half of us were there.
And he's like, hey, stick around. In fact, he almost insisted. I was a little scared that they were going to
no, you don't. Because they were like, no, we don't want to be anyway. I said, no, honestly. I go,
you're like, sit down. I'm not done with you. I think that's what you said.
No, I said, me and the one on the right, not Ashley.
Do not say that you remember their names.
Ashley and...
That's ridiculous. I don't remember their names.
Well, that's what I do. She was like, I'm just getting into whiskey, so that intrigued me. I'm interested in what their mindset is because it helps us kind of shape what we talk about on the podcast to know what people are thinking about, like when you're a newbie into whiskey.
And there were women, so sometimes it's a lot of dudes in our whiskey lounge.
Right.
And, I wouldn't say rare, but it's less prevalent to come upon women who actually like whiskey.
Right.
And are engaged. They want to talk about it.
Right. Now, our whiskey lounge is also very smart in the fact that they serve wine in there, which means sometimes you go in there and there'll be 4 women in there after work having wine. And then while they're in there, they get intrigued by what cocktails you can have with whiskey, which is why we did episode 10, which was kind of a ladies' night cocktail episode. Mm-hmm. And I've lost my train of thought. Scott, jump in.
I think the train stopped. Maybe we just segue. We wanted to go through each of the episodes and pick out our personal favorite moments or just some funny things, maybe some behind the scene things, talk about the people who are our guests on there. Episode 1. It was our first time with the equipment.
Right.
Our first time speaking into the microphone.
Badly.
Hearing ourselves for the first time recorded. And we were a little stiff.
Right.
Hello and welcome to the first podcast of The Whiskey Tangent. I'm Scott. This is Ed. Say hi, Ed.
Hi, Ed. Right, that's fair.
I think I edited that episode more times than any other episode because I was so worried about how we would sound because it's the one that most people are going to listen to first.
Right. And it's a shame because it's still not one of my favorites because I look back and very critically at my own, but I did a flight of Mishners. I never really had sampled the
Michters?
Mishners, yeah, thank you. Mishners.
Michters?
Michters?
Michters.
Yes, Michters. I'm putting a TH sound in
You're putting a sh in it.
I'm shh.
You're Mishters.
Right. And I got to try 4 different...
4 different what? Michters.
Yeah, Michters. I had 4 different mixtures for the...
Michters!
I listened to it again this week in anticipation of this episode that we're doing, and it's incredibly informative. I mean, Scott and I did a nice job with research for the MGP and one of our favorite whiskeys. Bulleit Rye was our go-to for years, so we brought that in and we went against Redemption and we talked about how they were the same but different. And
it really did establish the pattern that we ended up just adopting over time is comparing 2 whiskeys.
And people seem to enjoy that, and we had a few rants and tangents, but we still felt like we were really still doing work, like we're still focusing on stuff.
Yeah. Episode 2. The Flat Earthers thing had come to my mind as something that I was going to bring up later when we were recording. And I had no idea that Ed had also sort of a related rant about the moon landings.
I watched something the same week pissing me off. People saying that the moon landing was faked and they have no evidence. It's just something that sounds good. So
we're recording the episode and we're being very pedantic. And then Ed stops us like 20 minutes in. And it's like, no, stop. We're being boring. I'm boring as shit. We can't do this. This cannot be our second episode.
It's the only time we really did this. Start over. We got to start over.
No, we're fine. We already started 4 times.
Such a lie.
3 times?
Twice.
Okay.
We were trying to be so informative and so professional, and the reality was we lost our edge. I trashed it, and I said, talk about what you really feel like talking about first. Scott had heard a podcast on Flat Earthers, and he was all wound up. Vintage Scott being Scott.
It's ignorance mixed with arrogance. Like they
so
they don't know anything about the subject, but they're so arrogant to think that only they actually do know the truth. And it's a vast conspiracy by governments and scientists and NASA. A conspiracy to do what?
My rant, which goes along with that, which is that people think the moon landing was faked. There were 6 moon landings, just for the record. When people say we faked the moon landing, I'm getting all amped up again.
You are getting amped up again. So if you haven't heard that episode, no.
If we had never got the whiskey that day, I think it would have been okay because we just decided that we were going to do what we feel like doing, talk about what we feel like talking about, and it's just been great.
Episode 3. Bit of a departure because we didn't talk about 2 different whiskeys. We talked about 2 different things. The whiskey lounge that we had just joined and a whiskey tasting that we had just gone to.
Right.
Not at the whiskey lounge.
We cheated.
Right. Because we're actually going to a whiskey tasting at the whiskey lounge tomorrow.
Ironically.
Yeah.
Yes. But just for the record, it's from Bulleit Distillery, and we'll be talking about that in a future episode.
Right. Will it be good?
So bad.
It's terrible.
I'll ask him to edit that out.
I will not. Bad puns are what we're all about. Maybe Time has them. We could do a flight.
Possible. We should go to Time. That's in Philly. To one of our favorite whiskey bars in Philadelphia.
As I say, every podcast, we're going to mention it every time.
And, in there, I gave a public service announcement. We were like, oh my God, it was so gross hearing about your colonoscopy. Well, I mean,
oh, right.
You have to look at the humor of the event. I mean, like, I didn't actually detail things being inserted or anything. I was just talking. Well, actually, I did. I take that back.
Yeah,
I absolutely did. I go back like 3 weeks later. He throws me back on the table again. So there, my dress pants are down around my knees. The same assistant's in the room. Now this time he's got me watching the TV screen of my colon. He wants to show me what he's done, right? He goes, now, we may encounter some stool. Don't be embarrassed. And I said to him, why would I be embarrassed, Doc? The stool is where it's supposed to be. You're not where you're supposed to be. It was meant to be humorous, and most people found it pretty hysterical.
I think it's your flat-out funniest story because it's not an angry rant.
No.
It's a funny story about, being in the doctors and being vulnerable and being embarrassed. And Episode 4. Girl Scout cookies.
Right. This is where I feel like Scott finally let his hair down, which is an ironic statement because he's bald. Yeah. But
thanks.
I'm just being honest. He doesn't have any hair.
Well, on my head.
All right. Now who's being inappropriate? So out of nowhere, he starts it, and it seems like a productive conversation. He's talking about how an article came out pairing the different Girl Scout cookies with different whiskeys, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
I read an article a while ago. I just came across it again recently.
Okay.
Pairing Girl Scout cookies with whiskey, which at the time I thought was brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. It's great. But you know what? Fuck that. Fuck Girl Scout cookies. Because
fuck Girl Scout cookies.
Fuck Girl Scout cookies for two reasons. One, they're annoying. They're everywhere.
The children are annoying?
Just the whole process.
Okay. It's not the children.
I'm not hating on the children. Well,
wow.
Okay, partially. Yeah, and again, I didn't tell him that I was going to do this. No. I just said, I have a pretty good rant that we can go on to.
Correct. Something that's important for you all to understand. We don't really plan.
The rants, we don't.
When we're doing the whiskeys, we usually each pick a whiskey to go do the research on the distillery if we need to.
Right.
We like to be knowledgeable because we want to appeal to multiple people. Someone who's new, staring at that wall of whiskey that we call it in the liquor store, what should I buy? Even people that are experienced have been maybe drinking the same two things, giving them info to go buy a third thing and try something different. But then for someone who's been drinking 10, 15, 20 years, giving them background on stuff that they might not have known.
Right. And it's not something that people are going to necessarily do. Oh, I like this whiskey. I'm going to go look up its entire history. Nobody does that.
Right.
And I think, honestly, that's one of the most fun things about doing this is doing that. The real history starts in 1870, where Colonel E.H. Taylor bought a distillery that was built on the land. And then from there, George T. Stagg purchased it. It was purchased by another company. There was a fire. There were floods.
Locust.
Albert Blanton, who Blanton's is named after. He ends up becoming the master distiller at a certain point. That was in 1897. Then, of course, Prohibition comes and goes.
Did they work during Prohibition?
I read somewhere that they were open and producing whiskey for medicinal purposes.
Right. That's a prescription you wanted to have in the 30s.
Yeah, and back then that was an actual thing.
Oh, yeah.
Doctors would prescribe.
Medicinal marijuana now. So 100 years later, line up.
It's medicine.
Get your prescriptions.
It's medicine for me, that's for sure.
I'm a teacher, so it's not medicine for me. Not since Bush Sr. was president.
Right. We're huge whiskey nerds, and Ed's a teacher, and I was an English major, so we're used to a lot of research and reading and historical references, and that's really been one of the biggest pleasures is researching all of these whiskeys, finding out the interesting connections between them.
Correct. It goes back to Scott's rules, right? We want to be entertaining, and we want to be informative. We really try that as our two goals, and having simple goals like that make things a lot easier.
Yeah. Episode 5. Our first cocktail episode and our first guest.
Right. So we brought Gabe in, who's one of our oldest friends, who was for years a wedding bartender and a whiskey connoisseur right with us. Like he's one of our whiskey buddies. We've drank so much whiskey with him over the years, and he has a great palate.
Yep. Gabe and I have been friends since
8 years ago, according to Facebook today.
We've been Facebook friends for 8 years. And actually, we've been longer if I didn't unfriend him by accident.
I mean, Scott and Gabe were actually, I guess, older friends than I am.
like 1988, I think I met him. Yeah.
I've also been friends with Gabe for a very long time.
I mean, it's a comparable amount of time. It's not like you've been friends with him 3 years and I've been friends with him 30 years.
I've been friends with Gabe for over 20 years, for sure.
Sure.
And I mean, what a great guy. And what's great about Gabe is you can really razz him. He has a huge tolerance and he can give it back and he has a thick skin and we really go at each other a lot. And as
evidenced by the 2 episodes that he appears in and the short.
Right. When I called him our whiskey Sherpa and he should stop talking so much and just carry our whiskey to the top of the mountain. He didn't even get fazed by it. He just kept talking. I loved it. He just let that go right off him.
It's once again goes what you said about having the bite ratio in the mixture.
Mm-hmm. It's a study in balance.
That was a Pulp Fiction reference.
Yeah. You might not have heard that. He might have been too far away from the mic. But that's all right.
He heard it. He was yelling. I heard it.
Well, you heard it because he's standing right next to you.
Oh. So,
Yeah.
I will say this, not to cut you off, Gabe, but you can jump in a second. I think the thing about the old fashioned is
Know your place, Gabe.
maybe two, maybe, yeah. You don't even have headphones.
I'm such. Oh, shit.
Thank God we're not on TV.
We've decided that if either any of us can't be here for an episode, Gabe would be the replacement.
That's true. That's very true.
He would be like the guest host.
He's the Shemp to our Larry and Curly.
Yeah, if I ever have my gallbladder out, Gabe will be here for that week. And so he came in and we wanted to do a cocktail episode on what we consider 3 classic whiskey cocktails.
Right.
Old Fashioned, the Manhattan, and the Boulevardier.
I might have a Boulevardier
You may.
right now.
Right. Why not?
I got Campari right here.
If you've listened to episode 5, you know a Boulevardier is not my favorite cocktail.
So Campari is it's bright red. It used to be made with like sea creatures or something to get that red. Yeah. So yeah, I'm
Making that up.
I am not making that. It's not. There's a fruit called the chinetto or something like. Where's my?
This is absolutely ridiculous. Now I'm not being part of this at all.
No,
we're just making. What is it like a Alice in Wonderland? It's from there.
You're just a hater.
You're just making fruit up now that we. Don't
I
know.
am not making it up. So chinetto, it's called. So there's a little Mediterranean citrus fruit. It looks like a tiny.
No, there is.
It looks like a tiny orange. It's like a.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, open it up.
Wow, it smells terrible. It smells like an orange's armpit.
And I shan't be having a
You
Boulevardier.
shan't. Would you like a Manhattan?
Sure.
We'll have to pause. You want to pause and come back with a drink?
Yeah.
All right, let's do
made
that.
with Bulleit Rye.
Round 1. So, contrary to what I said earlier about having a Boulevardier, I decided to also make myself a Manhattan.
Scotthattan.
A Scotthattan. And I made a double for both of us. Ed, while we were off air and he was making notes, he drank half of it already.
I can't help it. It's delicious. And Scott informed me that I just drank 2 shots of whiskey.
It's basically like he took a Manhattan, a regular Manhattan, and just did it as a shot.
Yeah, it was delicious. So
Well, I make good Manhattans.
he does. He makes really good cocktails. Check out episode 5 for confirmation.
But don't check out episode 10.
Or the minstrel up short.
Because I totally fucked up those. Episode 6.
This was our first journey outside of the United States whiskey-wise. We did Jameson and Powers, and it was really wonderful to compare the two because, first of all, Jameson is much maligned as being a throwaway shot, and yet, neat or even on the rocks, it does have standalone qualities.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was very surprised because, like I said in the episode, I only had it as a shot.
Right. And the Powers came through
So good.
having more complexity. And, you have the Jameson, which sells about 30 million bottles a year, and Powers has 3 million bottles. So it's much more select and more crafted.
Yeah.
And it tastes that way. In episode 6, we talked about our journey to the Anglesey pub down in North Wildwood.
Yeah, that was really our first education in Irish whiskey. The bartender there, for some reason, took a liking to us and decided to give us a trip through the entirety of Irish whiskey. Yeah, and they were friendly bartender pours as well.
Yeah.
It was filling the glass to the top. Even though there was ice in it, it was to the top every time. And these weren't small glasses.
Right. The highlight of the night for me was Scott singing along with the band doing Down Under by Men at Work as loud as he could. It was the highlight. It was a really good time. And
I also remember you finding me later sitting on the front steps
Yes.
of the establishment,
Yes,
not remembering where I was.
yes, you were getting some air.
And Powers was actually the star that night, too.
Yeah. Right.
And it was very similar to what we did in episode 4 with Eagle Rare and Buffalo Trace, which are two expressions made by the same distillery, but very different.
I love how sometimes we'll choose two whiskeys, not at random, like we're choosing them for specific purposes, but then they have additional hidden similarities. They share a history, or they share a mash bill, or they share taste characteristics that you wouldn't expect. Like, for instance, in episode 2, where we discovered that the picture of the dude on the Old Granddad was Basil Hayden.
Right.
And we had already paired them together.
Right. So the Old Granddad they're talking about, well, guess what, was Basil Hayden. A lot of fun.
Episode 7.
We compared our origin stories. For me, Woodford Reserve, and for Scott, Knob Creek were the first, what we would call craft bourbons that we got into.
I remember that episode being really tough to craft the tangent because we went off on the Kate Smith controversy.
The entire country was racist in 1931. I don't understand how she gets labeled with somehow being on like the cause of racism.
Right.
Like, if anything, I mean, did anyone ever see the movie Holiday Inn with Bing Crosby? It has got some of the most racist scenes in it that I've ever seen in movies. And they, by the way, they still show that movie.
It's a beloved holiday classic.
Every single year that movie comes out. And in the middle of it is a scene of blackface and singing that is just a horror show.
And we actually tangented from that into like Bill Cosby and Michael Jackson.
Right.
And
We got
all
into a
these...
lot of heavy issues that we Scott decided to cut because it wasn't funny and it wasn't informative.
Correct. So it's a good thing to bring up that Ed and I, we have very well-reasoned and long-standing political opinions, but we decide not to do it on this show because
it's not what the point is.
It's not fun or informative.
Right. We're at the bar. We've already dealt with the annoying parts of being alive and work and life, and we've come to the bar for a whiskey, and the last thing we want to hear about is XYZ that we find stressful. So
if we wanted to do a political podcast, we'd be doing a political podcast.
Certainly, and it would be just as good as this one, except angrier.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys who do a podcast called Whiskey Congress, but that's what they do. They drink whiskey and talk politics.
Right.
Now, we could do that, but that's not really what we want to do.
And I have to tell you, it's pretty funny. I was in the bar someday, and somebody was drinking a nice whiskey, and I'm talking to him, and I give him the card for the podcast, and he took it, he stopped, he goes, "Hey man, I'll listen, man." And
it's not political,
not
is it?
political, right? No. And I was like, we're not. He's like, cool, because I just don't feel like that.
Yeah.
So we know there's people out there that just want to escape from the bullshit of Facebook. You know what I mean?
Right.
If everyone just structured life with, is it informative? Is it funny? Then don't post it.
Right. Episode 8.
Our July 4th episode, so we decided to do Jefferson Reserve in honor of one of my favorite founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. He's an interesting person and complex and certainly flawed, very flawed.
Sure, they all were.
They all were.
They were human beings. Even great men can be flawed.
And society was flawed, really. This goes back to the Kate Smith argument.
Ed and I are flawed. We're great men.
Right. Yeah, I'm a few pounds overweight. I could probably do some neat.
Oh, an old-fashioned definition of the word "great," like the Great Lakes.
Right.
I'm a dick.
You're. Exactly. And what Scott and I started to do was, since it's kind of a bitch to set everything up,
right,
we would do a short and an episode together
to
kind of give us a week off so we didn't have to drink. I mean, don't get twisted, we did drink, but we drink a lot more when we do an episode and a short. So we had Jeff over, he did a short with us, and then the episode that followed it, which was the Jefferson Reserve, and he brought a lot of interesting questions and stuff to it. He's been a friend of Scott's longer than mine as well.
Yeah, Jeff and I have known each other since like 9th grade.
You're going to be hard pressed to find a nicer, more intelligent person than Jeff. He's a great guy, and honestly, so happy that he could take some time out to be with us on the podcast. He added so much, and we'll have him back on again.
Yeah, like he came in, and I didn't even expect it, but he was the one who came up with the Whiskey Jeopardy questions.
When this Robin Hood star was prevented from drinking Johnny Walker on set, he injected vodka into an orange so he could have his alcohol.
Who is Errol Flynn?
That is correct.
Holy shit. Is that true? That's awesome.
Errol Flynn, man. One of a kind.
Actually put cocaine on the tips of his penis as well.
He didn't, did he? How do you know that is the question.
Well, you don't forget stuff like that.
Well, that's true. Once you hear that, I'll never
forget that now.
Right. Just for the record, as far as self-esteem goes, I lost Whiskey Jeopardy to Scott. Then I lost the offensive shot names to Gabe. I'm 0-2 in competition.
Okay, so what I need to do is create a new quiz
that I can win.
that you can win,
Exactly.
and then put it against some patsy.
Somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bring somebody in here.
Yeah.
Okay, Sergio, calling Sergio. Come on in. And I'm going to...
Sergio will take offense to that. He'll be like, what do you mean you're going to beat me?
No, I'm not. We're going to rig it. You have no chance of winning.
Okay.
We're going to totally skew the game. And you'll like that because you'll be like, thanks, Obama. So the reality is Thomas Jefferson was a brilliant man,
and did not like whiskey.
which is really amusing. He was a wine drinker. I guess.
But Washington was a fan of whiskey and even distilled his own, which we talked about. That was one of my favorite research episodes because I knew about the Whiskey Rebellion and something, but I didn't know the particulars of the presidents and their relationship with whiskey.
Right. If you feel like being raped for whiskey, go to Virginia, to
Oh,
Mount Vernon.
yeah. Listen to the episode and the prices that they're charging for probably terrible whiskey.
Right.
Episode 9.
We talked about Elijah Craig and Evan Williams, small batch.
Right. Just to follow up the Founding Fathers of America, we thought we'd do Founding Fathers of Whiskey. And we chose these two gentlemen. Their whiskeys are today, the ones that are named after them, are made by Heaven Hill. And then when we did the research, they lived in the same area of Virginia that ended up becoming Kentucky at around the same time and did about the same things.
They had to know each other.
Yeah.
So Elijah Craig wins that battle, hands down, taste-wise. But the Evan Williams is at least 30% cheaper for the price for the small batch. Scott took my Manhattan from me. I want to know. He took it away. I'll tell you exactly how long ago. He took it away 16 minutes ago from me. I haven't had a drink in 16 minutes because he said I drank mine too fast. And so I'm technically supposed to get it back in 6 minutes.
Okay, 6 minutes. Okay, you can have it back in 6 minutes.
Well, but I really want it now.
No.
Okay. The fact is I can drink straight out of the bottle.
You can reach the bottle.
Can't stop me.
No, I can't. You're right.
Grown ass man. So
anyway, we're talking about the tangent that we went on was about us being angry and having a separate, very anger-filled episodes.
I'm wondering if we're getting curmudgeon-y in our old age. I decide to announce to Walmart that they need to run their place better. So I say, just like this, "Yo, Walmart, is this your first day in business? How much longer do I have to hold 3 items before you open up another goddamn checkout line? Is there a manager for this nightmare? Is anybody in charge of this nightmare?"
Because they have been repaving the fucking entrance road to the train station for 3 fucking weeks. How long does it take to pave a road? I've seen it done overnight out here in front of my apartment. They did an entire major road. 3 weeks it's taken. I've been waiting at that fucking exit for 3 weeks. It's definitely worth going back and listening to him, but the title is Two Angry Men, which is a riff on the old black and white film called 12 Angry Men about a jury and a murder trial, I guess. Very famous. Henry Fonda's in it.
George C. Scott was in, I think
George C. Scott
was in it also.
Yeah. But the whole episode's called Elijah Craig versus Evan Williams, Two Angry Men. And I didn't want people to think that we thought that those two guys were angry men.
No, we were.
Episode 10. You will get your drink back in 2 minutes.
Okay. Episode 10 with Ladies' Night at the Whiskey Tangent Podcast. We decided that it'd be interesting to make some drinks that were kind of geared towards the ladies that specialize in whiskey. And we did a bourbon lime Ricky, a cranberry whiskey sour, and then we made a whiskey ginger peach that we fucked up. Now,
first I fucked it up, and then second Ed fucked it up. But I will admit Ed's was better.
We will make it again and make it better. It won't be on air. It might be on the air. Who knows? Depends if there's ladies around.
Right. Well, that was a lot of fun
Yes.
to get their opinions on the bad pickup lines.
Right. So we had 3 girls come on, Shelby, Nari, Andrea.
Right.
And Scott was smart enough to come up with a segue between the 3 drinks, which was cheesy pickup lines. And it was hysterical to hear them react.
Are you a parking ticket? Because you got fine written all over you.
No.
Oh my God. It was so like...
God, they hated that one. They
hated that one so
guys,
much.
Guys, if you're out there that listen, hated it.
Here's the last one in this round. Nice legs. What time do they open?
Oh! That's a punch in the face.
Oh, a new rating.
don't know how he thought of it. And this is the brilliance of Scott. Mostly they either loved or hated him, but then they would have splits between them where two would hate it and one would love it. And that was very interesting to see. So
what I do is I end up picking up little snippets of conversation that Ed had. So a lot of these ideas are actually yours.
Word vomit. I just spew stuff out. And Scott grabs it.
Yeah, you were the one thinking about having a ladies' night,
right?
And like what we could do, and then that kind of morphed into let's do a cocktail episode. In another conversation that we had, you talked about doing one about the fast and shop names, which ended up being a short that we did. I made a quiz out of it. But in researching those bad drinks, it's when I found a website that also had bad pickup lines.
I think I originally was thinking, let's offend the girls with the offensive shop names and see what they thought of that.
Right.
And having gone through that episode, I'm glad we didn't because they are really offensive names. Right. I would have felt awkward saying like slow, comfortable screw to like 3 27-year-olds looking at me like,
true.
what?
And some of the drinks were like cunnilingus and circle jerk. And it's like,
that was a tremendous decision not to do that.
Yeah. By the way, I have given Ed back his Manhattan.
Yes, thank you.
He's allowed to drink.
I've already
now.
drank two giant sips out of it. And
Wait,
now,
look, I'm almost down as far as you are.
Oh yeah, you did good. You're doing good.
I'm catching up. Episode 11. I remember it was like, I went to Ed, it's like, okay, we have to come up with the subject for a new episode. And he's like, you know what? I feel like we should do our favorite whiskey because we haven't done it yet. And that's Angel's Envy Rye. And I'm like, okay, let's do rum finished whiskeys. We'll pick another one.
Right. So we originally had two. We were going to do the Tullamore Dew, finished in Cabernet rum.
Right.
And then the Angel Envy.
Right.
And then we invited Gabe to guest host again because he hadn't been on since episode 5.
Not everybody has common sense in this world, which is a whole other podcast we can get into.
Correct.
Right. Common sense is not common.
Common sense.
Right. We could have a common sense podcast. We'd all talk like this. Hello, welcome to the Common Sense Podcast.
Good to see you.
I'm Scott.
I'm Ed.
We have a guest today.
Can I
Gabe.
finish?
No, we're on
Can I finish?
We're on the Common Sense Podcast.
All right, I'm done.
I don't understand why Gabe's talking so much. He's like our bourbon Sherpa. And he brought Teelings.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
I've never had, and none of us had until
I'd never heard of it.
Well, let's just say I've drank 2 bottles since episode 11 of just the Teelings.
I've had one myself, yeah. Episode 12.
We went down to the shore.
Yep, our first remote broadcast.
First, we went down to Bunkers Marina.
I had to bring all this damn equipment down the shore.
You did a wonderful job.
I was afraid I was going to forget something.
Right, then we have to record on our phone. So Mike and me have known each other since pretty much birth.
Really?
And,
Birth?
Yeah, well, our mothers were best friends since kindergarten. That's how we met.
That's so cool.
He was a dick when I was little. Don't get all sentimental.
Wait, was he?
Yeah, he was like, well, you figure Mike's 3 years older than me. So when I was like 5 and he was 8, he's like, he don't want to hang out with me.
Sure.
One time I threw his glove to him and it hit his chest and it fell to the ground. He let it. And then he goes, don't throw my glove. And I go, well, you should have caught it. And then he punched me. He punched me as I was opening up the door and I landed at our mother's feet in tears.
Why didn't you tell that story on the episode?
I don't know why. Because I
totally would have kept
it. It just came out in therapy this week. No, yeah, he was a violent little bastard. But
he's such a nice, gentle guy.
I know. He's a dick as a kid. He really was. He had issues.
My Maker's Mark Bourbon Street lamp for my bar.
Oh, wow.
Scott gets to see.
That's
now.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
This is a big bottle. My wife couldn't fit it in.
That's cool. Oh, hello.
Well, hello.
Hello. Your wife couldn't fit it in. Yeah. Wait, what?
Behave.
What happened?
Behave. Talking about his wife fitting stuff inside of her.
Sorry, Kim.
He said it wouldn't fit.
You made it dirty.
No, I did. You're right.
Double barrel.
Yeah.
And this fits in like this.
Stop saying fits in.
But we did Maker's Mark and Larceny because Scott and I had a really bad experience a long time ago with Maker's Mark. We had bought the 46 when it just came out at my old house. So we had to be at least 6 years ago. And this is a time way before podcast days when we would just get together, buy a bottle we had never had and see what we thought.
Just hang out. Yeah.
Which is what we do now on the podcast. Right. Thus why Scott said we should do this.
That's right.
And we've been doing it for 8 years. So
seriously, like the exact conversations that we're having now, we had 8 years ago. We just weren't recording them.
Right. So we got the 46 and we were excited because, man, Maker's Mark is a cool ass bottle. They got the wax on there. They got a great history.
Now, granted, neither of us really liked Maker's Mark itself.
Right.
But we thought the 46 was like, okay, this is a higher expression.
Right.
We had experience with higher expressions of base spirits. And this was like, okay, yeah, let's get it. And we hated it.
Hated it. Like drinking it on the rocks. We're like, oh my God. Like,
It was terrible. Although in the episode, we did rehabilitate our opinion of Maker's Mark. So maybe we will like Maker's Mark 46 now.
I don't know. I'm afraid to try it again, but we had.
I'm not going to buy a whole bottle to try it, but
what the only
what I mean is like we might have it at a bar.
Oh, buy it out the okay.
Yeah.
So I like the Larceny better, which is a Heaven Hill product.
Larceny's good. I remember liking it at the whiskey tasting in episode 3 that we went to. I liked it better than the Maker's Mark, but not a whole lot better. Episode 13
was the Battle of the 10 Years. And I have to tell you, talking about two interesting, delicious expressions. One was Henry McKenna, 10 year. Also from where, Scott?
Heaven Hill.
Henry McKenna is one of the best drinking whiskeys I've ever fucking had. Okay? I'm going to say it like that.
Wow.
Holy shit.
Wow.
It was so good and it finished so well. And it's supposed to be about $34.
Right.
Now,
so it had just won this year one of the most prestigious whiskey tastings, the San Francisco Spirits Competition. And its price skyrocketed.
Yeah, like it won the whiskey's biggest package award or something like that. Like
it won best bourbon.
Right.
And then won best whiskey overall.
Right. That means scotches and everything.
Right.
Other one we did was Russell's 10 year.
Which we just killed tonight.
We actually finished it because we were warming up. And it was very, very interesting, very peppery, and it was spicy, and it was very unique.
Siobhan was the guest. She's my next door neighbor. Yeah, I met her like a year ago.
Right. And
we went to the Iron Maiden concert together.
Right. She's just real cool people. We don't want to get stagnant. So by bringing different people in that we think that we kind of vet a little bit as being interesting and having something to say and having something, kind of interesting about them. We went to Siobhan's birthday party when she turned
40.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's the whole reason you're here.
Well, wait,
10 years.
Yeah, I know it's 10 years, but it could be any 10 years.
Yeah, you didn't have to tell her age.
No, but
you want to hand out my social too?
Hold on.
my place of birth?
No, just your credit card number.
Oh, all right.
4217-3159.
Because she's not even a whiskey drinker.
No, she doesn't drink whiskey. We just forced her into the show. We're like, we just want her because she's funny and she's willing to try everything. So she tried it,
Sure.
And it gave us a perspective of a non-whiskey drinker trying whiskey, which I thought added something to what we were trying to talk about, especially when we're dealing with two very high-level expressions like McKenna and Russell's.
Right. Okay, so maybe we should talk about the shorts. Whiskey short.
Right. So, I mean, the first short we did was How to Drink Like a Pro. And honestly, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, we had decided early on that we were going to do the episodes every other week. And then it was like, well, what are we going to do in the weeks intervening? And one night he was over here, he was like, fuck it, let's just do it. We're just going to do it right now.
The first thing we need to do is like tell people what to do before you go out drinking. So we talked about pre-gaming and eating some food and getting a base and staying hydrated and how to handle it in the morning.
And it came out great. So we decided to keep doing it.
So we mix up our shorts with being informative, whether you should put water in your whiskey or not,
right?
What glassware makes a difference,
right?
How to drink like a pro, how to get over hangovers and stop the screaming of the cats.
Right. Quick tastes of special whiskeys that we've encountered or bought.
We did a quick taste of a Blood Oath. Mm-hmm. We did a quick taste of a Game of Thrones whiskey that from Downwinnie, Al Stark. And we did Jim Beam and Jack Daniels in our way.
Right, a comparison, yeah.
We did at another one, which we call Whiskalenius. We did Jim Beam Double Oaked, the Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, the Jack Daniels Honey Liqueur. We even did Heaven Hill White Label at $11.73 a fifth. It was not terrible.
Wait, did we do that in a short? Or was that part of an episode?
That was actually part of an episode, but I'm throwing it in here. We did talk about it and taste it.
We did have the bottle here.
Yes, it was here. And me, $11.93. So you're like, this has to be dog shit. And honestly,
it wasn't bad.
It was not complex.
No.
It was corn and sweet and simple.
But seriously, if you have $12 and you want to get fucked up, buy it because it's not bad.
Heaven Hill, I take my hat off to you. Not great whiskey, but definitely get drunk off of whiskey.
So maybe we should count up the whiskeys that we featured, the distilleries, and see which ones we did the most of. Because Heaven Hill would definitely rank highest. Maybe.
I mean, we really just keep crossing paths with that distillery's work.
Right.
And we'll keep coming back to them.
Right.
Though I think we really hit them pretty hard.
I mean-
and I don't know that we meant to do that. We just did that.
No, it's just what we're into. Okay,
right.
so let's talk about what's coming up.
What's coming up is
Yeah.
we have the episode after this one, which will be 14, which we haven't really decided on, but 15 we already have
not.
figured out.
Yeah, 15 we're going to do as we've been doing every 5
Right.
episodes.
Fall cocktails with our good friend and buddy Anders, the bartender at the Whiskey Lounge. He's a fucking genius / artist. Like,
Yeah.
he has forgotten more about making cocktails than Scott and I will ever know.
Absolutely.
He is really passionate about what he does, and he's got a lot of experience.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
He's very excited about being here too.
Yeah. So I kind of planned out the episodes. I'm going to have to get it up, but I think
What?
that I'm going to have to get
How
it.
excited do you have to be for this?
I'm going to get it up.
What
Jesus
does that mean?
Christ.
Fucking don't edit it, but explain it.
Okay. What I mean by that
The fuck?
is I made the calendar. Is what I mean. I have to
bring
get
it
up.
up. Then bring it up.
Bring it up. You're
That's
right.
a hell of a different than get it up. Get it up sounds like you're putting demands on yourself.
Oh, shit.
I think we're doing Jägermeister next episode. It's Jägermeister versus Rumpelmints. Which one's more disgusting?
So you're right. At 14, we have not decided what we're doing, but it might be something to do with the Bulleit tasting that we're going to tomorrow night.
Right.
Episode 15, Fall Cocktails.
Fall cocktails.
And then we have 16 through 19 will take us through December, and those will be port wine finished whiskeys, single barrel whiskeys,
right.
double oaked bourbons,
Right.
and wheat whiskeys. And so we will not do number 20,
Until
which
the
would
next
be
year.
winter cocktails,
Right.
which would not come out scheduled now until January.
Right.
So if you Scotch lovers listen to us, you know that we've only touched one Scotch on one short,
Right.
which was the Game of Thrones one, which wasn't really that great. Like,
So-
it was fine.
Right. We think that we're going to use one of the episodes coming up to bring in 2 scotches that we specifically are targeting non-scotch drink.
Right. I would love to do Japanese whiskeys, Indian whiskeys.
Right. Do you think we should do Japanese whiskeys before scotch?
No. And here's why. If we do all American stuff,
Right.
that's fine. If we do Irish stuff, that's also fine. But I think we need to do at least one episode focusing on Scotch, because there are 6 different areas in Scotland that produce Scotch
Right.
of different taste characteristics. And we need to do at least one of those before we even venture past that, because these are the countries where it originated.
Hey, listen,
America, Ireland, and Scotland.
I'm
And-
with you. We need to do some more Irish whiskeys.
Yeah.
We need to do some more Scottish whiskeys.
Yes.
So I think that's fine. And that's the fun thing about this podcast. We can go in so many directions.
Yep.
It's endless. Because we still have to do state by state
Oh,
whiskeys.
man.
Wyoming whiskeys, Colorado whiskeys. I've had New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland whiskeys. We can go on about the different whiskeys per state.
Yeah, I have a list of episode ideas that is about 30 long. We're going to be on the air until 2038.
Right. And if, like many people surmise, if I cash out early, Gabe will take my spot.
If you cash out.
As we just said, Gabe's on call.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Would you just get out of here already? Okay, well, maybe we should wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered it. Thanks so much. This was very kind of personal and self-centered on our part, but we wanted to do it. We thank so many people for supporting us in this endeavor.
Yeah, honestly, like I said on Facebook when we passed 1,000 downloads, it's like it literally would not be possible, and we still wouldn't probably not be doing this if people weren't listening.
Right.
Like, it really does make a difference to us. We really appreciate people listening to this. I just wanted to
Right.
say
And
that.
as you listen, we really push ourselves to put out a nice product. If you can listen and share this to other people and get other people to listen, it'd be great. We really appreciate it. I want to thank Scott for all of his effort. And it's been probably the most fun I've had in a very long time doing this podcast.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for being the perfect comic foil and sort of the propulsion behind each episode. Like, I keep things organized, but you move them
Well,
forward.
thank you. We really make a great partnership, and we really appreciate all our guest hosts that come in here and add what they add to keep us from getting stale.
Yeah.
Because we never want to do that.
True.
And we'll have new guests on for the upcoming year and all that. So
Yeah.
we're going to sign out. Keep listening, keep drinking good whiskey, and have some fun.
Cheers, everyone.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode, be sure to check out our next episode, which is way better than this one.
Oh, yeah.
Also, follow and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Whiskey Tangent. And follow us on Twitter at Whiskey Tangent. You can follow me personally at That Whiskey Guy. And follow Scott at Giant Cup of Awesome, spelled AWSUM, just to be annoying.
Hey.
You can email us any questions, comments, or love at whiskeytangent@gmail.com. And of course, you can find us always at our podcast website, whiskeytangent.podbean.com.